All right. I think we are back. It's my pleasure to announce our next panel discussion. This will be the State of the Air panel. I'd like to introduce Michael Abrazinskis, who is the Director of the Division of Air Quality, and Lisa Zach, who is an attorney with Troutman Pepper in Raleigh. I will let you all take it away.
That would help. Hi, everyone. These virtual events are so fun. I know we're all looking forward to seeing each other in person next year. Thanks to the Chamber for doing this. Mike, thank you for always being such a valued panelist, and always appreciate your insight, and looking forward to starting this up. So I think a great place to start would be to talk about attainment and NACs in North Carolina. So if you want to talk about how we're doing.
All right, great. Thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Sean, for the introduction, and thanks to the NC Chamber for the opportunity today. So our attainment status in North Carolina is a great place for us to start because there's great news there. We continue to meet all of the federal health-based air quality standards in North Carolina statewide, and we've been in attainment for over 5 years now. So that's just tremendous news. So the last time that we all got together, we were focusing on two main items in the world of national ambient air quality standards, and that was the sulfur dioxide designations and completing those, and then ozone in the Charlotte area. And so regarding the SO2 designations, y'all will recall that North Carolina received attainment/unclassifiable designations for most of the state during EPA's first 3 rounds of designations. And now the fourth and final round of designations has taken place. That occurred back in December, where EPA designated the remaining 3 areas of the state that were not previously designated as attainment/unclassifiable. So these were the areas where source-oriented monitoring, ambient monitoring was necessary, or even a source-specific SIP was necessary to ensure that those remaining areas are in attainment. The other area that we were focused on last year at this time was ozone in the Charlotte area. And that was an area where we were very nervous at this time last year, to be quite honest, about the potential for violating the ozone standard during the 2020 ozone season in Charlotte. And we were evaluating data and looking at cause and effect relationships. And we even had some very productive discussions with Duke Energy about exploring some operational flexibilities for their units in the Charlotte area during the 2020 ozone season that might help assist in reducing emissions. So all of that was taking place when we spoke last year at this time, and then the 2020 ozone season started about the same time that the pandemic started. And so that obviously changed everything in the mobile source NOx emissions profile, which is a very significant contributor to our ozone issues in the Charlotte area and really all over. And so that emission profile changed late spring and into the summer. But needless to say, it was a unique year from a precursor emission standpoint. But no matter how you look at it, we had no ozone exceedances statewide in 2020. The data show attainment with the 2015 ozone NACs, and that's great news for public health and all of us focused on clean air being a great selling point for our state economy.
So do you have compliance concerns as we all kind of get back in our cars and head back into work? And how are you dealing with those, if so?
Yeah, great question, Lisa. I do not have concerns at this time relative to the current 2015 ozone standard. The values were so low in 2020, and combined with the values from the prior 2 years, 19 and 18, which go into the calculus to determine your attainment status. I think the math works out in our favor with 2 pretty good seasons out of those 3 years in that 3 years time span. So, we're going to carefully monitor, continue to monitor this. Obviously, 2019 was not a good year for us, which was the last full season under what I'll call normal emissions profiles. But I do have confidence moving forward. I mean, our emissions projections from the mobile sector show a continued decline in NOx emissions over time as older vehicles retire and are replaced with cleaner, lower emitting vehicles, or maybe in some cases, zero emission vehicles. And so I've got pretty good confidence that we're going to be in good shape relative to the standards that are in place now.
Great. It sounds like sometimes there are hidden benefits of a pandemic if you look hard enough. So that's great. I wanted to also have an opportunity to build on Sean's great discussion on environmental justice and talk about how at the DEQ level, there's opportunities to engage the agency specifically, if you want to address those.
Yeah, thank you. And this is definitely a topic I want to spend a little time on this morning and really focus on how important our public participation process is in the permitting process. And I think I'll start with just a quick reminder of what our rules require and then kind of build from there. Our major source Title V air quality permits are ones where the rules require a public comment period. Those rules also give the division the ability to schedule a public hearing for those types of permits if it's determined to be in the best interest of the public or if there's significant public interest. For all of our other types of air quality permits, so the true smalls or synthetic minor permits, there's not a public comment period that's required for a draft permit. But we also have that ability to schedule a comment period and a hearing if it's determined to be in the best interest of the public or if there's significant public interest. But above and beyond what the rules require, and you heard a little bit about this morning, our department and our division now have policies and guidelines in place for enhanced public engagement. And we started implementing that in DEQ specifically at the beginning of 2020. And so our process in DEQ for permitting starts very early in the permitting process. As you'd imagine, once an application is received by the division, we're going to determine whether the application is complete, and then we're going to apply our guidance to determine whether it meets criteria for conducting an environmental justice or EJ review. And enhanced outreach. And again, y'all heard a little about this morning in one of the tools that our group uses in the evaluation of EJ. And so you heard some of that from Renee Kramer in the prior session. Conducting that EJ review really helps us determine in DEQ what type of enhanced outreach methods may be necessary for that area, for that project. And so for air quality permits, we established some criteria when environmental justice reviews will be conducted. And the first is for any new Title V permit, greenfield. Next is for any major modification at a PSD source that results in a significant increase. And then the third situation is really case by case. And director's discretion. And, we have some knowledge about what types of sources typically get some public interest. And we have a pretty good sense in what communities are usually engaged. And, we may get public interest on a project even before we get a permit application on a project. That may be the first time we even hear about a project sometimes, is because some communities have gotten wind of a project. And so we may have 500 requests for a public hearing on something that we haven't even received an application for. So that kind of gives us a clue, right? So that might fall under the director's discretion bin there and maybe triggering this analysis. But these EJ reviews ultimately determine the type of enhanced outreach methods that we would use for that particular area. And it's that enhanced outreach that makes every effort to give communities access to decision makers and gives those communities an opportunity to be heard. So I think what's the takeaway message for facilities? We are emphasizing to facilities that keeping your community that you're a part of informed and educated is becoming a more critical part of a successful and smooth permitting process. And if DEQ's public process for an air quality permit is the primary way that a community is finding out about a project, that becomes a pinch point in our process. We get pretty heated comments if it's, again, our process is the way that folks are finding out about something that's going on in their community. And so that has the potential to slow down the permitting process. And obviously, I think obviously most everyone does not want that. So I would say that, in wrapping up on this topic, Lisa, you heard Sean say in the previous session that this is a rapidly evolving topic. You also heard from Bill Lane in how important this topic is to the department. And I'll say that those points are both true. And our integration of this process into our permitting process at DEQ is admittedly a work in progress, and we've been doing well, but the majority of time that we've implemented this was also during a pandemic. So we're committed to continue to improve and evolve this process over time.
That's a great point, that it's more challenging to bring a community together during a pandemic to discuss these kinds of issues. So I'm sure that's been a challenge.
It has been, and we understand those concerns about virtual public hearings and the lack of access to maybe the hardware or even the connectivity issues in some rural communities to participate. And so we've made every effort to expand the ways that people can interact with us. We've added phone lines to the webinar programs. We've added voicemail boxes on phone lines where people could just call and leave extended comments in a voicemail. And all of those are above and beyond the conventional ways of providing a comment on a matter, which is email or a written letter, always work just fine. And so each one of those are weighted equally in our process.
Great, that's good to know. So we've seen a lot of action at the federal level already in terms of carbon emissions. So I wanted to touch base on those as well. We've seen action to rejoin the Paris Agreement. We've seen movement on the social cost of carbon calculations and the Keystone Pipeline. So I'm wondering if you can look into your crystal ball and, to the extent possible, kind of project on how North Carolina may position itself to address these very likely upcoming climate regulations.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, Bill Lane said it well in some of his comments this morning in his opening remarks. He said at the state level, we're already engaged and there's a lot of work going on in this space in response to Governor Cooper's Executive Order 80. And so maybe I'll just give a quick overview, a couple of those things, and then we'll take a little deeper dive into a few aspects on this topic. So first, there's a risk and resiliency plan, North Carolina's risk assessment and resiliency plan that was released last summer. Now, state agencies like ours are really focused on reporting our resilience strategies as a follow-up matter to that report. Again, this is focusing on understanding the climate stressors, assessing the impacts to assets and programs and services, and then kind of qualitatively assessing vulnerabilities and risks and defining what actions we can take, and then really framing a path toward continuous resilience building in everything that we do. So that's one piece. Another piece is the North Carolina Climate Science Report. That came out last year as well, and there were some revised versions with edits that were published in the spring and summer. But that's the report that really looked at all of the peer-reviewed scientific literature to provide a focused look on what historical climate changes look like in North Carolina, but specific climate projections for North Carolina that help inform all aspects of the state's climate-related activities, from adaptation to mitigation strategies. And then another piece is, of course, the Clean Energy Plan, and that was released back in 2019, but there's a lot of work underway to explore policy options to get timely and specific CO2 emission reductions, to expand clean energy resources, with values of maintaining affordable electric rates, assuring grid reliability, and making sure that all of this is done with an emphasis to ensure an equitable transition to a clean energy future for our state. And so, there are many stakeholders that have been engaged in various components of exploring those Clean Energy Plan recommendations. Bill mentioned an A1 process and a B1 process earlier, and I'm not really prepared to get into a lot of those details because some of those reports are really, the ink is still drying. So I would say that, there's just a lot of work going on there and a big commitment from our state on this topic, and that's going to continue. But there are two other things that I can mention, Lisa, that have occurred more recently, if you'd like an update on those.
Sure. I think you're referring probably to Reggie. Is that where you're going, or?
That's one area I can touch on. So yes, so our division and the Environmental Management Commission received a petition for rulemaking on January 11th, and that came from the Southern Environmental Law Center on behalf of Clean Air Carolina and the North Carolina Coastal Federation. And the petition is to adopt rules to limit CO2 from the electric power sector in North Carolina through joining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI for short. And so the petitioners propose regulations that establish a framework to join that regional effort for reducing greenhouse gases from that sector and achieve a 70% reduction in emissions from that sector by 2030. The petitioners provided about 52 pages of rule text. And so all I can say at this point is that we're reviewing it, via state law and EMC rules governing the submission of such a petition. The submittal must contain certain information that's specified in those rules in order to be considered complete. And that's the first step in the process. But then determining, beyond determining whether it's complete, then it would be referred to the Air Quality Committee of the Environmental Management Commission, and they would take it up at a scheduled meeting. And then if the Air Quality Committee chooses to recommend to present it to the full commission, then the commission would meet to take up the petition. And ultimately the commission, via state law, has 120 days to take up the petition from receipt of the petition. So there's that topic. But then about a week after that, we received that, something else happened. And that was the news related to EPA's Affordable Clean Energy Rule, or ACE. And so that happened on January 19th, where the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, in a split 3-judge panel, vacated and remanded to EPA the ACE rule. And so in that ruling, the panel really basically stated that there were fatal flaws with the approach. I think they said something about the central operative terms of the ACE rule hinged on a fundamental misconstruction of the Clean Air Act. And so while we await the mandate and the EPA's reaction to this, my team at the Division of Air Quality has paused work on the required plan to comply with the ACE rule. This plan was due, or was to be due to EPA in July of 2022. It's a lot of work. We'd already invested probably over 3,000 man hours in my division on just compiling data and doing analysis to start working on a plan under that framework. And so, I can say that what we were starting to find as we were getting into that analysis was that there was going to be very little additional reductions of CO2 emissions from this particular federal regulatory framework in North Carolina. But for now, that work is paused and in all likelihood has ended.
Right. Yep. And so knowing that the ACE rule has been vacated, do you think that you'll be picking back up the Clean Power Plan, or do you have I know you can't project this, but if you had to give a best guess about where North Carolina would be going, would you take that plan off the shelf that you probably put on the shelf in 2018? Yeah,
that's a good question, and I think I'm not going to wade into speculating at this point. Secretary Regan's first confirmation hearing is later today, and we're excited for him, and I'm sure that's all going to go well. And so I'm not going to wade into speculating what he and EPA will what their response will be to a complicated matter.
Right.
I think, North Carolina is committed to moving forward with pursuing CO2 emission reductions, period. And not just from the electric power sector. That's an important sector, but we've got to be looking, broadly across all sources and all sectors and putting ourselves on a path to a lower carbon future and accomplishing all those core values that were noted in EO 80 and in the Clean Energy Plan. And so I think I'm going to refrain from wading into speculation about what the feds will do at this time, but obviously we are very interested and we want to be at the table. We want to be at the table in productive discussions on that matter.
Right. Great. And if you don't mind just touching back on Reggie for a minute, could you lay out where the opportunities for public participation are going to be in that process that you laid out, just so that the regulated community can be aware of when they should tune in?
Right. So if, as I mentioned, if a petition is determined to be complete, then it's referred to the Air Quality Committee of the Environmental Management Commission. And so obviously those are public meetings. There are specifics in state rule that kind of outline an opportunity for the committee to hear from various perspectives on the petition. And then if the petition is moved from the committee onto the full commission, then the commission has a certain timeline to take up that petition. And then it can go a variety of ways at that point. But I think, ultimately, if any petition is granted by the EMC, then it triggers the rulemaking process. And that rulemaking process includes the typical opportunity for public comment. And so, but that's several steps on down the path. And so I think at this point, we're really just focused on reviewing a voluminous petition that really just came in. And so that's our focus right now.
Got it. So stay tuned for more information.
Yes, indeed.
Got it. Good. And it doesn't look like we have any questions yet. So maybe we can touch on just giving a kind of a PFAS and air related update.
Yeah, thank you. So in the world of PFAS, we continue to learn more every day. And, I feel like a broken record because I feel like I've said that at every public speaking opportunity over the last 3 or 4 years. So we continue to learn more about this, but that's true. And it's something that's just evolving all the time. And, it requires time spent with EPA researchers, with university researchers, colleagues across the U.S. You know, and you know, it's a difficult matter, and it's an area that needs focus, but we have limited time and resources to apply to it. So that's also an issue. I'd say, you know, what we're working on at DEQ right now, and what we're really focused on right now in the world of PFAS, is further analyzing the data that we have. We've gone from data poor to data rich over, you know, about 3 or 4 years. We've got to continue our interactions with those subject matter experts that are out there. We participate in many regional and national calls on this topic. And we're talking about PFAS experiences, and then we're internally regularly interacting with our colleagues at the Division of Water Resources and Division of Waste Management. So we're constantly learning from each other within the walls of DEQ, and so I expect that'll continue. I also think, you know, from a DEQ perspective, you know, we are going to have to seek further source emissions characterizations, from method development to stack testing. And we are interested in partnerships with folks on that. If anyone in the regulated community, or at EPA's Office of Research and Development are interested, I think that's an area where the science and the methods need to continue to advance, because when you find these things in the environment and you suspect that there's a source of emissions, or there's a known source of emissions, and you can't quantify those emissions, it's hard to figure out definitive cause and effect relationships. And so, you know, so I think that needs to be a focus area from an air emission standpoint. But I also think that just more broadly, you know, we're really focused on collecting quality data when we can, and having that drive informed decision making and sticking to that scientific process. You know, that's critical, and that will continue. And how well we do on any of this is really more of a capacity and resource issue for DEQ. So, you know, I think there are many other things I could say about PFAS, and I could even dive into control techniques if you want to a little bit, but I'll just pause there and see if you have any particular questions.
Yeah, we do have a couple that just came in, so I can read those. The first one we touched on a little bit. It says, besides ozone, what is the state's overall air quality? I think you've said that, you know, we're doing good.
Yep, we are. Yep, we're attaining all of the national ambient air quality standards. So every criteria pollutant is in attainment, and we've been in that status for about 5 1/3 years at this point. I don't have the day counter in front of me. I used to have a little counter of consecutive days in attainment, so I need to brush up on those facts. But yeah, over 5 years, and that's just a great success story, and we should all be proud of it, because it took a lot of great relationships and collaborations amongst you know, a variety of partners, including the regulated community.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then to follow up on that, we have a question about the status of statewide monitoring systems. Just asking what the status is. Okay.
I'm going to approach that maybe from our operational status during the pandemic, maybe. But yeah, our status is that we're fully operational. You know, we are collecting complete and quality data statewide. Our labs continue to operate normally throughout the pandemic. Thankfully, we can service our monitors out in the field with one person going to an unmanned site pretty safely, you know, following all the proper protocols, of course. But yeah, so our network is in good shape. I would say, as is always the case with a lot of expensive electronics equipment in the field, there are always challenges and resource concerns, and you know, we're always trying to put ourselves in a position to make equipment last longer. We're also looking for ways to integrate a lot of the principles of the risk and resiliency plan that I mentioned earlier into our air quality monitoring. You know, we have little sheds that are required to hold computers and sensitive electronics equipment. And in the past, those sheds have been a lot like what you'd imagine you might have in your backyard that you store your lawnmower in. You know, it's just a uninsulated shed, and so we're improving the technology there, you know, and focusing on maybe getting a little better type of shelters that have insulation. Actually, instead of a window unit for air conditioning that freezes up in opportune times, we're getting more advanced systems that we can access remotely. And so we're saving money and we're lowering emissions by not having to drive back and forth to a monitoring site. And we're saving money and power by having more energy efficient shelters. So that's a quick snapshot of a lot of moving pieces and parts in the monitoring world.
Great. Well, it looks like our time is up. And there's Sean.